Good afternoon, everyone. Rick Garcia with G12 Communications. We're doing another video case study. Today, we're talking with one of the Northwest's largest health systems, Evergreen Healthcare. Now, with over 30 locations, they obviously serve an important role in the community, particularly now with today's pandemic environment. We will be talking with Portfolio Communications also. Portfolio is one of the most trusted telecom consulting firms in the Northwest. So this is a case study meant to tell a visual story how Evergreen came to be a G12 customer, what products they use, what problems we may have had a hand in solving, and what the experience has been like. What, if anything, they could pass on to others in their shoes. So let's get to some introductions. We have Greg Kreisinger. Greg's the IT director at Evergreen Hospital with 20 plus years of experience. And Greg has supported some of the biggest brands in the Northwest, including Starbucks, Primera, Blue Cross, Expedia, Philips. Greg, welcome to the call.
Hey, thanks, Rick. This is great. I look forward to this discussion, and I think you did me some justice by only saying 20 years. It just makes me feel old. But at the end of the day, what we're looking at is, I think you can take the last 20 years and say, what has changed in this space for voice? And 20 years ago, we were digital PBXs, and today we've meshed voice and data, and it all looks like one thing today. So I think this will be a great discussion. Thanks. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah, absolutely. We also have one of the brightest young minds in healthcare technology, and having served in network engineering roles at some of the largest healthcare systems in the Northwest, including Overlake and Swedish, Sean Roma now serves as a senior network architect at Evergreen Healthcare. Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Rick, for that introduction. I'm excited to be here to talk about what G12 has done for us and how great they've been for us. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Great. Thanks. Last but not least, we've got Scott Molnar from Portfolio Communications. Now, Portfolio, like I said earlier, is one of the most trusted advisors in the Northwest for telecom. And with 25 years plus experience in the telecom space, Scott's customers and partners really listen to him. He has their ear because he's got such great experience. I mean, CenturyLink and Quest and all in the enterprise space. So Scott, welcome to the call.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for the nice introduction. And you put me at 25 plus years. I'm older. But all that being said, I'm very excited about this because this is a great example of where one of my favorite customers had some issues and some problems they wanted to solve. And it was a feature of me bringing great people together to solve problems. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Welcome. So Greg, if you don't mind, let's just get started. We'll dive right in, and really, if you could give us a bit of background on Evergreen Healthcare and just kind of some idea of what kind of facilities you work with, and just kind of the background there.
Sure. Yeah. So Evergreen's comprised of a couple campuses. We have one in Kirkland, which has a number of buildings on it, and then we have one in Monroe. And then we have a multitude of remote standalone clinics and staff of about 6,000. The hospital was first built in the 60s in the space that it is now, and has just grown over time. They've just added on to it every few years because of the growth in the Kirkland area. And it's really, besides Overlake, it's one of the only hospitals on the east side that has the capacity to take on that many patients. Really, that's kind of the story behind it. So really, when I came to Evergreen, it was really a look at what are the systems that we have, and you could really tell that it had grown from a very small community hospital with a few hundred doctors to now a staff of more than 6,000. And then the challenges were in systems and policies and all of those things. So that was really where we started to dig into it, is really where we were and what direction did we want to go. Because when I got there, it didn't seem like we had much of a direction. So it was, how do we put this in a direction, and how do we, when we spend money, how do we make it so that we don't inconvenience those 6,000 users with downtimes? How do we improve unplanned outages? How do we improve maintenance windows? So that was kind of where we started with a lot of that 3 years ago.
Right, right. So that IT leadership, right? The granularity of process to kind of really smooth out the customer experience for you, which would be all of the users within the organization there. Got it.
Yeah, and it doesn't do us any good to say, hi, we're here from IT, we're here to help you, and then it never happens that way, right?
Right.
Or another thing that we put on you, and there's this, you already, all those 6,000 people already have a day job, and then we come in and say, we're going to need like 6 hours of your time for a maintenance window. What will happen? Well, none of your systems will work during that time, but it'll be okay because at the end we're going to give you something better, and at the end of the day, most of those people go, yeah, but it works now. I don't understand. So, so that was our guarantee to leadership, that when we spend money, that we're spending it in the right places, and we're giving the organization the ability to work during maintenance windows, so that we're doing the right thing, and it should be seamless. Because at the end of the day, all the staff, they shouldn't know about IT or care about it. They shouldn't care about the infrastructure. All they should know is I come to work and it works and it runs and I'm happy because I have a job to do.
Right, right. Very good, very good. Well, thanks, Greg. Thanks for that. Now, as for the telecommunications, as far as telecommunications infrastructure goes, maybe we can bring Sean in on this. What were you running, or what are you running, Sean, from a voice platform perspective?
Yeah, here at Evergreen, it's one of the first places that I've ever worked at that has a single unified platform for voice. Every place I've been, it's got some flavor of Nortel, some flavor of Avaya, and then hey, they decided to bring Cisco in a little bit later, and then that migration has taken about half a decade or a full decade. But yeah, here at Evergreen, they're a 100% Cisco Call Manager shop for IP phones. We run a large Cisco enterprise environment for our network. We have Cisco Call Manager phones, IP phones on the desktop. We have soft phones. We have wireless phones. We run our main campus on Kirkland, kind of a centralized deployment for all of our remote sites. They all phone back home to the mothership. And, we have a handful of Cisco ISR routers running, a few different flavors of call processing. So we've recently bought more G12 SIP, more internet, insert portfolio here to come in a minute. And, half of the routers run Cube. And on Cube, we have internet connections strictly dedicated for those Cube routers running that. And then we have a few routers running, the TDM stuff like PRIs, with a couple of different providers, either CenturyLink or Frontier. And we're trying to, we'll be retiring those shortly because they're pretty expensive.
Right, right. So now, do you run cubes in different locations, or are they all at a physical location? Are they on separate IP connections? What's that configuration look like?
Yeah, so the idea will be to soon distribute those really anywhere we want, regardless of where it is on campus or even at a remote site or even a data center in Seattle. But today, we have a couple of setups where they sit behind, Cisco Firepower routers, firewalls, and they route out to the internet. We're moving over to using Cisco Cube for what it was intended for, to be on the edge. And we just plug internet straight in, run a couple of access lists under to protect it. These internet circuits are now only meant to talk to G12, not the rest of the internet.
So I think that does it. That gives us a great sort of understanding of the environment and certainly the infrastructure from a telecommunications perspective. Now, this question really goes out to everyone here. So I'd like to figure out. I mean, what were some challenges, and maybe Scott, you can kick things off because you brought us in together to meet. But what were some challenges you were facing as you were deploying, or maybe the Cisco was sitting there? Scott, why don't you kick things off there?
Well, like all projects start, when Sean came to me and said, hey, I'm thinking about changing some things for the phone system and using some SIP trunking, et cetera, and looking for certain features, we had some initial conversations where it became clear that, yes, I need to do my regular job and make sure that I bring multiple provider bids in so that we get a competitive market price. But more so was, how does it work? Are they flexible? Is it going to be a good experience? Or is this going to be one of the hellish nightmares from cutovers of telco past, like in my last 25 years or so that we've seen in complex cutovers? So the analysis was price, and then also how are you going to do it? How do you recommend to do it? And can we work together on this? So we actually interviewed and had responses from all the major tier 1 telco providers. And then I decided, we need to talk to G12 as well because of the localness of the company and also the flexibility of how, once you get the numbers, what you can do to help a customer that's far beyond what some of the others were able to offer.
So was the Cisco platform in place already just with TDM infrastructure?
Yeah, sure. So, in that sense, Cisco was already there. Cisco, that's, again, one of the great things about having worked at Evergreen is, Cisco's been there since before I've been there. Back then, we were about 3 routers deep with about close to 20 PRIs running the environment between 2 data centers that were on campus. So it was you do the math, it's a pretty expensive solution just for dial tone.
So Greg, from an IT leadership perspective, was one of the primary reasons for migrating to a SIP solution? Was it to drive down cost?
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons, right? And the other reason really was if you're going to spend, because we had aging infrastructure, then let's go see what we can do, right? How do we drive the hardware costs down if we don't need as much, and not just repeat what was there before with new hardware? And then we're in our roadmap, it helps to have a roadmap, so that we were setting us up for the future. What else can you add on to that? And as we know, PRIs have been around a long time. They work fairly well. They are expensive. And then they take a bunch of hardware. So that was the other piece of it. How do we skinny down the hardware piece of it, but still not sacrifice the availability and the redundancy of your voice system? Because as we know, hospitals, when voice has a problem, everybody has a problem. So that was really the aging infrastructure piece of it. And then how do we drive the costs down, help set a path for our roadmap that is really forward thinking.
One of the unique situations in working with hospitals is the 24-hour nature of your business, right? It's 24/7. So there's not a good time to do the maintenance window. There's not a good time to ever go down in a situation like that. So Scott brings in a multitude of carriers. And then he brings in G12. And what were your thoughts upon meeting with a smaller carrier or a carrier like G12?
I'll let Sean answer that, because really at the end of the day, I left it up to the architect to really, where do we want to go? Here's the vision. We need to be, as I said before, we need to be forward thinking, and we need not to have to redo this again in a year, that we can just build on it. And then that's where Sean took that and ran with it.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, we're looking for a flexible SIP solution. Every carrier that I've worked with, they weren't very flexible. They would almost require you to do some sort of peering either over MPLS or something and have private circuits, that you'd have to tie into and you'd be dedicated to. If I had a CenturyLink problem, well, everybody had a CenturyLink problem or a Frontier. The good thing about G12 that we found so attractive was, I could have an internet circuit from anybody. Didn't care. Anybody that was legitimate in that area. Geography made a difference because, well, if I had a CenturyLink service and I wanted, one of our clinics, which they are in Frontier territory, well, shoot, that's going to be an expensive cost out the door. So, trying to think about how do we keep costs down? How do we have things, highly available? Scott had mentioned, G12 and SIP over the top, and I was like, oh, what is that? Oh, that sounds cool. Let's look into that. And one of the things I think, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but when working with a smaller carrier, I think they're more open to ideas that the customer may have. That a CenturyLink would be. I know we keep picking on CenturyLink, but it is what it is. But they may look at you and be like, "Are you joking? You don't tell us what to do. You don't tell us how things roll." And with Rick being CEO and part owner of G12, it's like, oh, you sure? This he's like the head guy talking to me and asking me, how do I want to do it? And I'm like, who are you? What? Who? Nobody asks these questions, from the providers.
Right.
So we thought that was cool.
Well, we came from the wholesale space, right? And so in the wholesale space, everything is critical as well. We're serving telecommunications customers, and we're flexible because we do understand what the underlying infrastructure can and cannot do. And so having that sort of knowledge behind us when we work with customers like Evergreen that have some unique requests, some dial translation requests, things like that, we're able to often accommodate that sort of thing. So we'll fast forward then. So let's talk about real quick just the product set. So right now it's SIP trunking and phone numbers. You do faxing. Why don't you just kind of roll into the faxing, just kind of what you guys use for faxing today?
Basically, it's write fax, and then a zillion fax machines, standalone fax machines out there. Finding a solution that worked for SIP, it took a little while, but I think it's way more solid than a lot of people think in the industry. That's all you hear is horror stories about SIP. You're doing SIP, and then you're doing faxing over SIP. So, and then we have some, Sean will go into this, but we have a newer design that will help us even improve our service and be able to troubleshoot faster, and I think to get a better product for our end users. Hospitals still do a ton of faxing. It's crazy. Everybody thought faxing died out a number of years ago. We still do hundreds of thousands of faxes a year. So.
And then recently, to accommodate, I guess, the pandemic sort of situations out there, audio conferencing.
Yeah, so that was another big one. We've always had WebEx, and now we have Teams, and then audio conferencing. We had a number of bridges from G12, and then the pandemic hit, and everybody freaked out, as they should, because it was all about communications. And we sent the first people home that had laptops. They automatically stayed at home. Then the next step was, who doesn't have a laptop? How do we get them home? And then it was, well, how do we communicate, right? So I think it's pretty crazy how fast you can do something when you have the whole organization behind it and you have the right vendors too. That's the other piece of it. I don't know how many we put in, but it's a ton of audio conferences, bridge conferences that we put in, and they work. And we had a need for one that was, I think it was at 80 normally, because most of the people are in the room. And then we said, hey, Rick, we need one that goes to 250. And it was like, wow, 250. So, and you guys made it happen. And we use those today. So nobody's in a room anymore. Everybody's either in their office or at home or somewhere in the hospital, and they've distanced themselves. And the key is that we have the ability to communicate, and business goes on.
So we'll move this to signatures. So you guys work on, we come to an agreement, you work on a contract, and then the deployment phase. And does that fall on Sean and then Scott? What were you thinking too from a deployment strategy there? Or Sean, what was your strategy for implementing? And then Scott, you can chime in and tell us what that looks like typically, and how this one was different.
Yeah, sure. So we've had the 425,899 block for forever. There are thousands and thousands of numbers, and we essentially needed thousands and thousands of numbers in another contiguous block. And so worried that we've got close to 10,000 numbers needing to be ported, and we're just like, oh shoot, so all right, Rick, is this going to take us all year to get done? Because everybody else I've talked to, they're like, well, we can maybe get it done in 6 months. And it's like, but 6 months? My gosh, I don't know that I have, I want to wait that long. And so, we come to you guys, and, it's, you're working on our schedule. It's like, well, how fast can you do it? Like, what do you mean, how fast can I do it? Like I said, it goes back to, nobody asks me that question. And pretty much, you guys did it as fast as we could handle it.
It was fascinating because I've been involved in my decades of experience. I've been involved in a large number of significant phone system cutovers with hospitals and law firms nationwide, et cetera. And so I've been through the disasters. I know what the gotchas are. And so part of this was when we interviewed all the different tier 1 carriers, some of them stood up and said, well, there's no way you can do this in less than a year or 6 months just for the porting alone. And by the way, we're going to admit to you that we're going to screw this up and it's not going to go well. And I said, well, that matches my experience in the past. And the leadership at Evergreen here is saying, hey, we need this to go off without a hitch because we're a hospital. And after talking with you, Rick, and doing all the prep and the pre-design, when this cut over, what was it, Sean? Like 26,000 DIDs cut over in 3 minutes?
It was, I don't remember what the exact number was, but it was very fast. And the only problems that we actually faced were problems we created ourselves with forwardings in other carriers that we totally forgot about. And that actually, you know, Rick was really fast to point out, hey, I think this is, you might have to call these guys and tell them to take that forwarding off really fast. And so it was probably one of the best experiences I've had for a port that big.
And I think a lot of it was the prep work too. Well, prep work is almost everything, right? It's not really cut. It's the prep work piece of it. And we piloted this with all of IT, and we piloted it with some people in IT that didn't even know they were piloting it, which is a pretty good thing too, right? Because there should have been no difference, right? I get calls, I make calls, somebody calls my number and it rings my phone, right? It's pretty straightforward. It's all the pieces on the back end that are different now. So that, I think that was, we piloted it for quite a while and then made that decision to cut over. And it really, that was really a non-event. So
yeah, that's the best you could hope for. That's a great way to put it, because that is the best you could hope for, a non-event, right?
Yeah.
You're moving that many numbers over. You know, everyone's bracing for impact, if you will, and it just turns out to be a non-event. So let me ask you about support, guys. I mean, you know, what do you think of G12 for support purposes, and how's your experience been working with us for anything support related, really?
Yeah, I can start. I think I just say that you're always there. That's the key. We had some issues early on with WriteFax and how they deliver or how they seamlessly integrate with SIP, and faxing it just is somewhat of a nightmare too, to tune and to test and to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do. And then we've had some totally weird things, like when we were blackholed by the University of Washington and we couldn't figure it out, and we had 27 people on that call on a Saturday, and it's like, what could this be? And it was great because you drilled down on it and said, all these numbers are the same prefix. Let's see where they go. Oh, they all go to this carrier. Oh, they're all University of Washington numbers. So that was really an interesting one where you didn't just say, yeah, it looks like it's not us. Our
Right.
calls go through. It was, you were there and we went, yeah, okay, well that probably makes sense. So.
How frustrating would that be, you know, to be a customer of a carrier that says, guys, it's not us, right? I mean, and though it may not be us, you are still experiencing some sort of impact that is still our service. And
yeah, well, it's clear it wasn't you. You had nothing to do with it. They blackholed the fax numbers for some reason, and they were getting busy on every fax. And as I said, we faxed hundreds of thousands of pages, and it's patient impacting when they don't go through.
right.
So, but that was one of the weirdest, unique ones I've ever seen. It's just like, how does that even happen?
Right. I've never come across it yet either.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think I'll let the other two guys speak too, but it's, I think, like I said in the beginning, it's you're there when we call you, you're there and you're going through it, and it's either it's us or it's the outside world outside of your network, or you know, you're there and you carry on all the way through it. And like I said, you don't just say, well, you know, when you figure it out, let us know what it was.
Yeah. No, very good. So from an IT leadership perspective, Greg, if you are talking to other healthcare administrators or other healthcare IT leaders, you know, what would you say to them if they were looking at either A, deploying an IP infrastructure or SIP infrastructure, really, and B, you know, using G12?
If you don't have it already, I mean, you're going there. Everybody else is going away from digital for the most part, and those are dying out. And so you're going to pick up some kind of VoIP solution at the end of the day. And then to make sure that two things, make sure that that VoIP system that you have is rock solid, that you've already done all of those pieces that you need to do on it. And then next piece is a good design for the SIP side of it, that you're redundant, you have HA, you can do these things. Make sure and think long-term too, and think the support side of it. If you have an issue, how do you do troubleshooting? Because troubleshooting on a digital system was really a piece of cake, right? Way easier. I just moved to another port. Man, it works, right? Here, it's way different. Usually when something is impacting, it's impacting everything. So that's the key. And I think I just reiterate what I said. It's been easy, very easy to work with G12, and your responsiveness, you're always there. So when we need bridge lines, we need we need to up how many SIP sessions we have. All of those things are done. They're not weeks on end and tons of paperwork. It's very easy and very straightforward to work with you guys.
Very good. So Sean, have you summarized some things for us? I mean, what's your experience been like on the technical side with maybe our support team or anything else like that?
Yeah, kind of reiterate what Greg was saying. You're always there for us. Like you, Rick, are always there for us. In addition to your support team, we always know we can pick up the phone, get the support we need, and whether we ask you to jump on or not. Like sometimes it's like, hey, Rick's for G12, so I'm like, what are you doing, Rick? We didn't ask for you this time, but you're there. You show up on the support call, and it's like, okay, well, that's cool. So from the support model, it's been great. I have never for a second regretted that decision from going to SIP from our old legacy TDM environment. One of the things I would probably say that has been a lot of fun is working with Scott. Part of what we had to do in preparation for this was go and get internet. That's been kind of my mantra for the past 3 years. Having Greg come on board, like anytime you get new leadership, you take advantage of the situation, or you tell them all the things that you don't think are working, and you're like, hey, these are all the roadblocks that I've had with previous leadership. How can you help me? And I need you to help me. Otherwise, we're both going to take these black eyes with you starting. And so, what we did was we went through all the contracts. We went through every single contract. We were like, hey, how do we save money? How do we do this? And this was actually a lot of fun working with Scott. And the amount of money we saved operationally was just astronomical per month. And in that year, that, just saying, hey, I've got a new service I'd like to spin up in G12. Well, all the money I saved, it's like, Rick, here, take my money, and I'm glad you did it. I'm glad we worked towards it. And the cost comparison between PRI and internet with SIP as a service on top of it, we've done so much.
Yeah, very good, very good. And Scott, so you didn't get any black eyes bringing in G12 and kept all your fingers and
right?
Didn't experience any heart attacks or anything like that during any transitions.
Right. No, I can say this with good faith, and I think the guys would agree with me. Any other situation, and sometimes it does happen, where it takes great leadership on the customer side to be able to have the confidence in their technical staff and their knowledge and their savvy to investigate a solution and actually go with what works best for them. It could have very simply been very easy to hide and say, I'm going with a tier 1 provider because it's safe. And it would have been a disaster, and it would have been a failure, and we would not be having fun. Having gone this route and done the extra research and having everybody come together to design this on the pre-engineering side, I think has enabled this to happen. This is some ferociously courageous leadership that we're talking about here, because it so simply could have been easy to hide behind a big provider.
Yeah. Yeah, no, awesome. Yeah, it's been, I will say it's been great to work with you guys. We really appreciate you guys as a customer. And then obviously the great relationships we get. I mean, I've got Greg's cell phone number, in my cell phone, saved as a contact, and it's been really good all across the board. So we certainly appreciate that. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure just kind of catching up with everyone and walking through this webinar. We really appreciate it. And if you're listening out there, We'd love to support you as a customer one day. So give us a call at G12. Okay. Take care, guys.